UK farmers protest. We're going to spend a little time at the beginning of the show on what's happening in the United Kingdom. I think that it rhymes with what they're trying to do in Canada as well. They're trying to take control using climate change as an excuse. And there's a whole bunch of tangential stories that go along with this. So the UK is quite a robust series of tabs today. Police ticketing protesters and arresting people for blocking roads in Calgary. Finally, honestly, it's taken years to have some kind of response. They use the War Measures Act on peaceful truckers, but allow non-peaceful people to terrorize major cities across Canada because they want to bring order from chaos, but first they need the chaos, right? So that's, I think, why these things keep happening. Blade runners are active now in Canada. I've got images of that to show you. Cocaine Randy allegations keep getting hotter, and Justin Trudeau's asked about that. I've got a video on that. He doesn't answer any questions about it. He just tap dances around it. Questions that may never have answers. Remember the girl who got locked in the chicken oven in the Walmart? Nothing to see here. No suspicion, no foul play. Everything's above board. She probably cooked herself or something to that effect. And I'm not meaning to be insensitive, but I think that the police are not doing their job, it seems. And it seems like they're covering up something or other. I'm not sure. I've got video of the police talking about this whole thing. And the detective himself, well, you make up your mind, but to me, he doesn't seem convinced. He doesn't seem convinced of the things that he's saying. Although the words don't even sound above board. Anyway, there's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. We have to start with war. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing, right? And Ukraine was authorized yesterday by Joe Biden before he wandered off into the wood or into the jungle to utilize American long-range missiles, and today they've used them. And so that's why when war seems to be getting hotter, I go with the war, what is it good for intro. And when things seem to be cooling down, I do the Fortunate Son one. I wish there was a song like Fortunate Son, but more Canadian, right? Because Fortunate Son is very Americana, right? But it still works. Anyway, Eva says, so Ukraine, in fact, launched the first long-range U.S. missiles into Russia with NATO's support, a clear escalation attempt by whoever is now calling the shots in the U.S. They're playing with fire and playing with all of our lives, which they clearly don't care about, or she says don't give a rat's ass about. Jordan says the Biden administration is seeking to spark nuclear conflict on its way out the door. The Russia-Ukraine war needs to end, and that starts with ending the flow of weapons and money. Not only is this not a peaceful transition, it threatens the safety and security of America. And so peaceful transition of power is supposed to be the hallmark of American greatness or something to that effect. Democracy and all the rest of that. Republic and all the rest of that. Anyway, now that there's not a peaceful transition of power, and it seems like the Biden administration is trying to start a war on their way out, that seems not good, right? Breaking with tradition and all that. Inside paper says breaking. Russia says Ukraine attacked it using United States-made missiles and signals that it's ready for a nuclear response. So no nuclear response yet, but Putin knows what they've done, right? And he's ticked. So Megatron says Bloomberg reported that Ukrainian forces have struck a border region with within Russian territory with a U.S.-made ATACM for the first time after the Biden administration authorized their deployment on Monday. So let's make this war hot ASAP, right? Let's do this thing, they say. So that's not great. I hope that we are able to, again, cool down whatever's going on. It doesn't seem like anybody really wants this other than the deep state who desperately needs a war in order to justify, well, all the bad things that a war entails that are seemingly going to happen anyway. So I don't know, right? It seems pretty wild. The invasion in Ontario and Canada is still ongoing, and Dominic LeBlanc and Rosemary Barton have a discussion about this, and it's an interesting back and forth. He's talking about the safe third.
So we think that.
He's talking about the safe third country agreement and defending Canada's border that way. Although once they did that, they opened up the airports to allow people to arrive that way. And so it's still really not defending the borders. Rosemary Barton unironically is saying, like, do you really think the United States is safe for everybody? And I think that's an insane take. The United States is a place where people flee to, and they have their own set of rules with regards to how they deal with that. And sometimes that's, if your gang is powerful enough, you can just take over buildings in Ohio if you're a Venezuelan gang, whatever, right? Like, they've got programs. So anyway, Safe for everybody, right? Here we go.
So we think that the Safe Third Country Agreement, which, as you noted, was a game changer in terms of closing what had been a loophole at Roxham Road, it's allowed us literally to turn back thousands of people into the United States who've shown up at border crossings. We think that the legal basis of that agreement is very solid, and we don't think it's necessarily reasonable to pretend that the American judicial system and the rule of law in the United States is something that can't be relied upon. So people can challenge an agreement if they want in court. We have every confidence the court will uphold this agreement, which has been in place for a very long time. And as you said, we have to wait and see specifically what the incoming administration may do. But we have confidence the agreement will survive that.
Oh, okay. But from a moral perspective, if you see there is a mass deportation happening in the United States, how reasonable is it for Canada to assert under that agreement that the United States is safe for everyone?
So, again, we have no reason to think the United States won't remain a safe jurisdiction. We have a lot of confidence in this agreement, Rosemary. It's very hypothetical to imagine these sort of widespread scenarios, but the United States is a long-standing ally of Canada. There's a well-entrenched rule of law. The judiciary is independent. There's a system of procedural and constitutional protections in the United States that have existed for longer than in Canada. So we have every confidence that their system remains robust and fair.
Well, yeah, and I mean, like, if you don't like Donald Trump, that's not reason to open your doors to refugees. Oh no, it might not be safe for you, refugees. Like, because Donald Trump is mean. They have a system. Like, holy smokeroni. Regardless, I think it's interesting that Rosemary Barton is suggesting that the United States might not be safe for certain people, mainly because Donald Trump is the president, or will be the president. He's the president-elect. Harrison Faulkner says, this is the new Liberal government immigration and population plan. This is net zero immigration. Net zero immigration? I don't think anybody's calling it that. And weird branding, because net zero is bad. It's like COVID zero, but worse. Flatlining population growth for the next 3 years, says Harrison Faulkner. This should have been the Conservative Party position for the last 5 years. No, right? Brett said this should have been the Conservative Party position now, down to zero, right? He's got the line zero, down to zero, nothing, zero. And yeah, it seems growth should be negative. Deport people, right? Deport people who should not be here. Yes, do that right away, because it seems like it's negatively impacting things. People like this guy, CBC watchers, highlighting this CBC article, human smuggler issued new Canadian passport after court-ordered surrender of travel documents. Oh man, the court took mine. Could you guys like issue me a new one really quick? Oh my God. Weak link passport screening process operates separate from the court police databases and criminology professor says. The federal government issued a new passport to an admitted human smuggler after he was ordered to surrender the travel document as part of court-imposed release conditions. This is our reminder that criminals don't obey laws. Like, sure, I'll give you my passport and then I'll apply for a new one, sucker, right? Like, they don't obey laws, right? Oh yeah, I did read that regulation about the firearm I'm carrying right now across the border. Thanks for reminding me. Right? Like, yikes. True North says, according to a report from the Parliamentary Budget Officer published Friday, the Liberals' 2025 to 2027 immigration levels plan will reduce the housing gap by 534,000 units, or by 45%. So Mike cuts right to the quick of it and says, so they're finally admitting our housing issue is because of too many immigrants. Got it. Thanks. Excellent, right? Good job, everyone. So yeah, it was completely overwhelming. Everything about our system, totally taking up all of the excess bandwidth in our system. And then people were putting up tents in parks in order to find somewhere to live because there were no other options. And so now after all of that, the Liberals are saying evil corporations abused our policy. And so we're going to change our policy now. And things seem to be, if not getting better, at least the pressure is easing off the system a little tiny bit, right? Like, but I'm glad they're doing it. And two, it proves that their bad policies drove these bad outcomes, period. let's talk about the United Kingdom. It's important because I feel like this rhymes with what they're trying to do in Canada using climate change as the excuse. Okay, here is sudden and unexpected. UK farmers, we've had rain every day for the last 9 months. I genuinely believe this is a manipulation by man. I don't believe this is natural at all. So yeah, I think that he's onto something, and there's a lot of, even before Canada was being heavily sprayed, and we are being heavily sprayed, unfortunately, the United Kingdom had people who were doing time lapses of their sky because they were like, I can't even believe how bad this is. Like, it's so obvious to me, and I'm going to do a video, so it's going to be obvious to anybody who watches this video. And still people watch the video and say, oh, well, I'm not sure. But this guy is taking it to the next step. And I've done a lot of research recently into weather modification. There was a lot of weather modification used in World War II, a lot of research done prior to World War II, during the war years, and used in World War II for concealment and for changing the battle terrain, as they call it. And in 1996, they released a document talking about their mastery over the weather, the technology they already had, miniaturizing the technology, putting it on planes, and being able to deploy worldwide, and so on and so forth. And I'm paraphrasing, right? But like, essentially, in 1996, they were saying, we've got all this technology, and all we need to do is deploy it, pretty much, and then we're going to have the ability to do this and this in a really, really material way. And I mean, now it's undetectable because people don't even think that we can manipulate the weather. And I think that manipulating the weather is as easy as manipulating the population. So here is this guy from the UK.
We've had rain practically every day for the last 9 months. I genuinely believe it's, manipulated by man. I don't believe that this is natural at all. What I would say on that is that I drove the other day to the carrot farm, which is the main carrot farm that supplies into Sainsbury's. We go in there, into their plant to buy carrots for the wholesale side, and they've got tractors buried in the fields up to their bonnets, what cost, £800,000 a time, with the harvest equipment, what are on the back of them. They can't get them out of the fields. They're just so entrenched in the mud. There's 2 of them that I saw in one field. So someone's got £1.6 million worth of kit tied up in a field that they can't get out. You then think they haven't got on the field to clear last year's crop, so we've had a shortage of carrots coming out of the season. They haven't then got onto the fields to plant next year's crop, so the crop we should be starting in a few weeks' time isn't likely to be available until September, October time. And just to give you an idea on that, Charles, of how bad the situation is on a basic commodity that I believe is one of the given things British farmers have always been good at. Yesterday, I had to buy imported carrots from China because I could not buy any carrots at all from anywhere else in the world. And that, to me, speaks trouble.
Yeah. So in the Second World War, Britain was saying carrots were the secret for their pilots being able to spot the incoming bombers, trying to hide radar, right? But the old wives' tale was because, British carrots were so fortified with goodness and all the rest of that they made their eyesight better, right? I remember my granddad telling me that in England. So maybe he was just telling a tall tale, but he was in the war, in the Second World War. So maybe it's true. But interesting stuff. That England can't grow carrots right now, right? That's pretty wild. And the rain is unrelenting. Rupert Lowe is asking, why do we have $3 billion a year and the tax on family farms is estimated to raise $520 million a year? Do you understand how that's a bad? Like, we could just reduce the amount of aid to Ukraine per year and we'd have enough to cover this tax, no problem. And these people say, nah. Here we go.
Rupert Lowe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the Home Office annual report, it is confirmed that for 2022-3, £3 billion was spent on hotel costs for illegal migrants, averaging £8 million a day. The cruel inheritance tax assault on British family farms and businesses is estimated to eventually raise £520 million per year. Does this Labour government need to urgently rethink its spending priorities?
No, Mr. Speaker. We've just had a budget that we're in the middle of debating and voting on, and I expect that will be the way we go forwards.
cuckoo, right? Like, that's pretty wild. So should we urgently reconsider what we're spending our money on? Nah, I don't think so. I think that's all right. Next. Steve says they're getting desperate. Guys, this isn't going well. We're going to have to say this is for the NHS. The OBR says the $580 million, says max $580 million a year. That's around 1 day of NHS spending. So that's what they're going to get out of this tax. Farmers must pay up for the NHS, says Reeve. Chancellor refuses to reverse tax raid as protesters prepare to descend on Westminster, on the Capitol. So there you go. And Rupert again says, why should farming families lose their farms to fund a failing health service that prioritizes diversity and translation over patient care? The NHS is there to serve the people, not the reverse. Reeves, the fake economist or not, is an embarrassingly incompetent chancellor. So farmers must pay for the NHS. The NHS is the National Health Service, just to make sure we're not confusing it with anything else. Abby says Labor will tell you that the tax on farmers is for the health service. That's a lie. They are taxing farmers so that they'll be forced to sell to Gates-sponsored corporations who will use the land for solar panels and non-agricultural business. It's what Stalin did, but in a 21st century way. And there are a lot of comparisons. There are a lot of comparisons being thrown around about that, comparing Starmer to Stalin and so on. Because of the attack on farmers, specifically. Stalin did a similar thing to the kulaks. British Patriot says tractors are rolling into Parliament Square and they're multiplying fast. Starmer made this illegal. Specifically, you can't bring your tractors, right? We're going to ticket this, so they're taking a risk, these guys. You can hear the UK crowds cheering as the tractors cruise by. No farmers, no food. And that's very true. God Save Great Britain says the tractors are already spotted headed towards Downing Street. The things are heating up. So there you go. Over 10,000 farmers are expected to protest outside Westminster tomorrow. I stand with the UK farmers. We need farmers. We don't need government. Yeah, there's a good argument there. I think that's a solid argument. Nigel Farage says, I will go live from the farmers' protest on X in 15 minutes. And so farmer versus Starmer, right? It fits. I love the memes. Nigel Farage again says, I've just arrived at the protest. No farmers, no food. So he's going through the crowd and he's got his security guys with him and so on and so forth. But it's probably a friendly crowd for Nigel. Here's Jeremy Clarkson. And I think I missed one. Lewis says, I've arrived at Whitehall for the anticipated British farmers' protest against the Labour government's cruel inheritance tax scheme against family farms. Jeremy Clarkson has arrived and is answering questions from the mainstream media. Here's Clarkson, and this whole walk and talk is worth it. It's only 44 seconds. Here we go.
Ends farming, which is seemingly what it wants to do.
Yeah.
Where do we get our food from?
Yeah. If they go on strike, then what?
I don't think farmers will go on strike.
No.
I think there's a lot more impactful things. I think farmers can do better than that. I've got some ideas.
Keep moving back, please, fella.
Sorry,
Be Jeremy for farmers.
Keep moving. Sorry.
Keep moving, please, guys. Sorry.
Of course we are.
Sorry, guys. Can we keep moving? How bad could this be for farmers, Jeremy?
It's the end.
In a hard right, Kenny.
If you actually stop and pay attention, it's the end.
What's next after this process if they don't back down? I would imagine if they don't back down, I would probably say we try and do a bit more like the French do.
Ends farming.
What he means by that is the French show up with their manure flingers and things like that, and they put quite a lot of pressure on the government. But the press are coordinated. The press are making it seem like the good guy is Keir Starmer and the bad guy are the farmers, right? And so farmers have hoarded land for too long. Inheritance tax will bring new life to rural Britain, says Will Hutton, and he's a reporter. He's a journalist guy. And so I don't think just Loki says this is dark, man. It's pretty dark, yeah. So that's the press's line, right? The press is on the government side. And what's happening in England if you speak out about this kind of stuff? Here's We Got It Back. Says a British man was arrested at 4 a.m. for expressing his opinion on Facebook about a Palestinian flag. Look how many police have gone to arrest him. Are the police a joke or what? There are people being stabbed, murdered, and raped, but social media posts are the priority. So 4 o'clock in the morning about a Palestinian flag, right? Let's get him. Let's get that guy who is in, I don't even know which side they're on at this point in time. If they're in favor of the Palestinian flag or against the Palestinian flag, it doesn't really say. So pretty crazy stuff happening, and they want to bring that to Canada, and we're going to talk about that later in the show. They want to bring that kind of speech control to Canada. Again, all of this stuff, it's lockstep. They're rolling it out, and they were trying to roll it out for COVID, but they lost. And now they're trying to roll it out before Trump gets into office, I guess. Maybe. We'll see. Concerned Citizens said, we must double down on our support for Ukraine. This is Keir Starmer, 55 seconds, talking about Ukraine. Again, what's happening in the UK looks a lot like what's happening in Canada. Here's Starmer.
I'm at the G20 with one message, which is that we must double down on our support for Ukraine. Tomorrow is day 1,000 of the conflict. That's 1,000 days of aggression from Russia and 1,000 days of sacrifice from Ukraine. So that is my clear message here. It's number one on my agenda. Obviously, I'm not going to get into operational details because the only winner, if we were to do that, is Putin, and I'm not prepared to do that.
Can you at least in principle say whether you'd like them to be green-lighted? Because I think you would.
I'm not going to get into operational details because Putin is the only winner in that situation. But I've been really clear for a long time now. We need to double down. We need to make sure Ukraine has what is necessary for as long as necessary, because we cannot allow Putin to win this war.
OK, well, let me quickly ask you about Russia. Have you spoken to Lavrov? President Putin's spokesperson has said...
I'm at the G20.
So there you go. We'll leave there. Putin. Right? And they can't let Putin win this war. And we've got to support Ukraine no matter what, however much it takes, however long it takes. Ridiculous. It's pretty wild. It sounds like Justin Trudeau. Let's talk about the Cocaine Randy. Cocaine Randy. So here, Ahmed Hassan is very upset for unparliamentary language, but I think they've done it to themselves. Here is Michael Barrett talking about Cocaine Randy.
Honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes, at the conclusion of asking his question, as he was sitting down, called the Minister of Employment and Workforce Development Cocaine Randy. That is extremely unparliamentary, and I ask you, Mr. Speaker, to ask him to withdraw that remark. Thank you very much.
I see that the member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes is rising in response to this point of order.
Speaker, I'm sure that I was referring to the other Randy as Cocaine Randy.
Honourable member from
Sly, right? That's pretty sly, pretty funny. Here is Naya, and she says, these peeps broke this open. So Andy Lee, Martin, this guy, I don't know who this guy is. I don't know who these guys are. But Andy Lee, essentially, broke open this story. National Post is reporting cabinet minister's firm shared mailing address with person named in cocaine bust. And people are making jokes like, oh, now we know who's supplying Freeland, etc. Right? Fill in your twitchy cocaine joke there. And True North is reporting, amid a number of scandals involving Employment Minister Randy Boissonnault, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre calls on Boissonnault to resign. So here's that.
The Employment Minister first denied that he and his company were profiting off government business, and then text messages showed the contrary. They referred to a Randy. Well, he claimed that it was another Randy. We now know there is no other Randy. We know he falsely claimed he was Indigenous in order so that his company could steal resources that were meant for real Indigenous people. And now his company address matches the address of a place that was the location of 2 cocaine busts. Any one of these things would be a resigning offense. Why won't he resign now?
Mr. Speaker, I know the person referred to in today's article. I've never met that person. I've had no dealings with her whatsoever. Those are the facts.
But the address is accurate. And I hope they didn't find all the cocaine. Because, you know. Alex says, happening now, according to the Liberal House Speaker, Greg Fergus, commenting on the government cabinet minister's long history with fraud, is skating close to the line of unparliamentary language, right? So, best not talk about the truth. That's very uncomfortable and unparliamentary.
The minister from Alberta is a fake and a fraud. He said he was not the Randy involved in his company, but we know that there's only one Randy. He said he wasn't involved in his company at the cabinet table.
I'm going to ask colleagues, today we've been skating close to the line in terms Excuse me, colleagues. I will start my comment again if you would give me the privilege of listening. At several occasions today, we've been skating close to the line in terms of what's acceptable language.
The minister from Alberta is a fake and a fraud. He said he was not the...
If it's accurate language, I think that's probably better than using inaccurate language that is seen as parliamentary, right? Andrew Scheer is doubling down on this too. He says you'd think faking being Indigenous to get grants would get you in trouble. Not in Trudeau's cabinet. Being a phony helps you fit in with the rest of the Liberal ministers. Conservatives increase pressure on Boissonnault to resign. So yeah, there's a lot of pressure coming down to get him to resign. CPC MP Garnet Genius makes an interesting point. The first ever First Nations Attorney General, Jody Wilson-Raybould, was fired for refusing to participate in corruption. Meanwhile, faking your Indigenous ancestry. That's fine. Here's Garnet Genius to make his point.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
The minister from Edmonton is a fake and a phony. He said that he was not the Randy...
I'm going to ask, this is a couple of times that I've asked the honourable members. I'm going to ask the honourable members again to remember when they speak directly to members, they have to be, of course, extend to them all the respect that each member, as members, are deserving of. So I'm going to ask the honourable member, please, to rephrase this question to start from the top.
Mr. Speaker, this minister deserves to be criticized in the People's House, the House of Commons. He said he was not the Randy involved in his company, but we know there's only one Randy at the company. He said he wasn't involved in the operations of the company, but text messages reveal that he is. He said he was Indigenous to profit from government contracts, trying to steal from First Nations communities. When will the Prime Minister fire this phony for making false claims to steal from First Nations?
So not likely because Justin Trudeau doesn't do that kind of stuff. Here he's asked about it and he dodges the question. This is Dave Aiken. So I feel confident that they quarterbacked exactly what they were going to say before they came out and did this little performance. So we'll listen to some of it, but not all of it. Trudeau warning for probably 60 seconds. Here we go.
Last question.
David Aiken, Global News. Thank you for taking our questions and taking them here at IMC. A company once owned by Minister Boissonnault is under investigation by Edmonton Police on fraud allegations. There are questions about that company and his connection to that company. He recently had to apologize for appearing to claim indigeneity. Can you explain to Canadians then who've been reading all these reports why you still have confidence in Minister Boissonnault?
Minister Boissonnault has addressed these and will continue to answer directly for those. In the meantime, I'm happy that he is continuing to lead on issues around jobs and employment and represent Alberta in our government.
Later today, Minister Heidi was going to testify at a Commons Committee on Indigenous procurement programs. One of the issues that's being raised is some companies are falsely claiming indigeneity in order to access these procurement programs. That gets us to the whole issue of pretendians, people or companies trying to falsely claim Indigenous status. As someone committed to reconciliation, I wonder what you make of this phenomenon that companies seem to want to pretend to be Indigenous.
I think it's extremely important that part of reconciliation is empowering Indigenous communities and Indigenous people to participate fully economically, which is why we've increased and emphasized Indigenous procurement, but also investment in Indigenous equity in so many larger projects. The question of identity is an extremely delicate one for the federal government to weigh in on. It is much more important that Indigenous communities themselves make determinations around the framework and the rules they have.
So Indigenous communities themselves should police pretend Indians who want to get kickbacks for having an Indigenous person in their leadership. Huh. Interesting. You think that'll work? Let's see how that works for them, Cotton. Gov.exe says, if the allegations against Randy Boissonnault are true, then a simple resignation is unacceptable. There needs to be immediate and full investigation when if found guilty, he loses his pension, is charged, arrested, and jailed. RCMP, do your job. They are doing their job. Their job is to protect the federal government at this point in time, it seems to me, right? It doesn't seem like they're supposed to be investigating crimes or anything like that. Although if you say something mean about Justin Trudeau, expect the RCMP to be knocking on your door. Unbelievable. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful